Welcome everybody to another episode of Ichabod's House podcast. And this is a very special episode today. This is our Mother's Day episode, which we've been telling you about for many months now. And we have a very special guest, our mom. Say hi, Mom.
Hello, everybody.
This is our mom, Connie, but we'll refer to her as Mom because that's who she is. And I'm, of course, Andy, here with my lovely sister, Jen. And today we have an awesome story. We're going to take a look at Lizzie Borden and that infamous axe thing that she may or may not have done. Probably did.
Not that we're encouraging the murder of parents, especially not on Mother's Day, but
And especially not moms. They clearly do the most.
And heaven forbid. They do the most. But it seemed appropriate to explore the depths of the mother-child relationship or the parental-child relationship at this time. So
Agreed. So we're going to get into, we do want to address the Google and Beyond we had from last week, actually 2 weeks ago, that we forgot about last week, but we're going to answer it this week. Did everybody follow that? So Jen has that.
Last week was a debacle of an episode. Andy and I had a hard time getting it together. So if you listened to that, I want to apologize for the foghorn leghorn incident.
I forgot about
that. Where we were unable to do any accents with any decency. But we were supposed to answer when epilepsy was a diagnosis, because the question was, could Rancy Venom have been an epileptic? Well, I think it's clear she was an epileptic. And yes, epilepsy was a diagnosis. It would have been referred to more as fits or whatever. But Andy and I are busy. And so we turned that question over to Ichabod to answer. And so some of these you'll see he will answer on our blog. And here's the thing about Ichabod. We don't know how old he is, and he's a dick. And
for sure.
He did answer those questions. They're on our website, ichabodshousePod.com, or you can check our page on Facebook, and his blog posts are there.
So now that we've answered the epileptic diagnosis question, which I'm sure our listeners were waiting on pins and needles for, we're going to get into Ichabod's nose. And I have a good stringy, juicy new one.
Let's hear it.
I don't know if you ever listened to the Thing About Pam podcast from the NBC Dateline podcast with Keith Morrison.
No.
It's really good. I listened to it during the pandemic. Anyway, it's about this woman who kills her best friend and frames her best friend's husband. And then there's a whole nother rabbit hole of things that happen. Anyway, it's called The Thing About Pam, and they've now done a limited series with it starring Renee Zellweger on NBC. And it's really good.
I believe that's streaming on Hulu as well. I have seen it.
Okay. Anyway, it's really, really good, and I'm enjoying it. And Renee Zellweger is fabulous. You've never seen her like this before. She's wearing prosthetics from head to toe, but it's very enjoyable to watch. Yeah.
Cool.
And Josh Duhamel plays the lawyer, and, he's just easy on the eyes. So
there you go.
There you go.
I watched a movie on Shudder called Terrified. And so it is from Argentina. And basically it's about some paranormal happenings that go on, and this creature that you can only see depending on how the light is.
Ooh, like Predator.
I'm going to call it kind of old and crunchy with a little bit of blood at the top. One of those you have to really dig out.
Right.
It's not great. It doesn't really have a plot. It's more just event after event, and doesn't do a good job of explaining where the thing comes from, doesn't resolve it, but it was scary. And so if you were in the mood for something scary, then there you go.
So you were terrified, and it sounds like it was a little painful.
I don't know that I'm going to say I was terrified. I'm going to say I was slightly scared at times.
Okay.
But mostly at the end, I thought, well, it was average.
Okay. All right. Mom, what do you got?
Average pick.
Well, I have some favorite authors. I won't go into any particular titles, but I do like Amanda Quick. I like Louise Penny. I like Stuart Woods and, of course, James Patterson. So those are four of my favorite authors currently, and they have been for many, many years.
So anything from them.
Well, I like murder mystery, which
Right.
you get through the Stuart Woods and well, in fact, they're all, I guess, mysteries, suspense, murders
Right.
in that genre. So I
Right.
really like that.
Okay. Well, good. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Are
all right.
we ready to go?
We are ready to go. So, let's go back in time for a bit to the late 1800s. Victoria was queen. Air conditioning wasn't a thing yet. Neither was indoor plumbing, for that matter, unless you were among the elite. And women were still second class citizens.
You know, that's right. Women couldn't vote yet. Any jobs they had were domestic in nature, such as being a maid or a nanny, although teaching was permitted, and woe to the woman who wasn't married by the time she was 18. She was labeled that harshest of things, a spinster.
Ooh, it shivers me at the thought. All right. So, and that's exactly the label Lizzie Borden, the subject of today's story, was given. And let's just reflect for a moment on this with a bit of social commentary. Lizzie Borden, as you probably already know, was tried for the murder of her father and stepmother in 1892.
So, what did it mean to be tried if you were a spinster? Well, it meant that there was no husband to lend an air of respectability to your existence, to be unmarried without a job, beholden to your elderly father and stepmother for your food, clothing, your very existence, was to make you something of a pariah.
Sure, you could teach Sunday school, you could volunteer for various organizations, or help tend your own house alongside the maid, but in general, you were considered a useless member of society, a burden, if you will.
Yuck. And it is against this backdrop that Andrew and Abby Borden were murdered in the home they shared with Andrew's daughters, Lizzie and Emma. Add to that the fact that Andrew Borden was not only wealthy, but also extremely stingy with his money. And you've got yourself a whodunit that would make Agatha Christie herself drool.
And I just want to point out, I think Agatha Christie was one of your favorite authors too.
Yes,
For sure.
Agatha Christie. Yes, for sure.
Our house was lousy with Agatha Christie novels when we were growing up.
You are truly correct in that.
Couldn't swing a dead cat without knocking one off a shelf.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'd fall asleep with the book on my nose because I fell asleep while reading it.
So let's just say, back to our story, let's just say that we think misogyny is bullshit, and it's going to be tough for this writer to abstain from biased reporting during this episode for obvious reasons. Moving on from that, let's get to our sources for today's episode. The first is an absolute jewel entitled The Borden Murders, Lizzie Borden and the Trial of the Century by Sarah Miller. The second source is called One August Morning, The True Story of Lizzie Borden by Troy Taylor. And I will say as well that there are a ton of books on this. There are a ton of documentaries on Lizzie Borden. There are a ton of articles. You can, if this is something that interests you after hearing this, there's no shortage of information out there.
Right.
This case is one that has stumped people for a lot of years. You may remember the rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks and accepted it as gospel. After all, someone did whack Andrew and Abby Borden, and on the surface, it makes perfect sense that it was Lizzie who did the whacking.
But is there more to the story? This case has been hashed and rehashed over the last 130 years, with new theories brought to light every so often, recaptivating true crime aficionados of all ages.
Do you think Lizzie is guilty? If so, be sure to listen to this entire series and let us know if we change your mind.
So let's get started by talking about the crime. The date was August 4th, 1892. The location was 92 2nd Street, Fall River, Massachusetts. The family and maid living there had been suffering from a stomach bug for the last several days, and one can only imagine the misery of suffering vomiting and diarrhea on a hot day while wearing 40 pounds of bloomer petticoats, 40 pounds of bloomers, petticoats, and a heavy dress.
Not to mention with no plumbing. I mean,
Um,
ick.
and also, and we'll get into this a little bit too. Lizzie at the time of the murder was menstruating. So
Oh,
She was PMSing. That's what it is.
that's what it is.
So you've got, total rage killing. Well, obviously, but you've got 90 degrees. You've got diarrhea. You've got vomiting. You know, feeling pretty rough. And we'll get into what they were eating for breakfast that day as well. Which, boy,
Hey, and remember when we talked about the hauntings of northeastern America in that haunting episode we did? And there's that bed and breakfast of Lizzie Borden, and you can actually go and have the breakfast that they had the morning they were killed.
Oh, goodness.
I know. Oh yeah, Jen, we're doing it.
No. You'll hear what Lizzie had for breakfast, which I would eat compared to what the rest of the family had for breakfast, which I wouldn't.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to hear about it. All right. So the maid, Bridget Sullivan, got up around 6 that morning. She was already feeling pretty crappy when she got out of bed and headed down the back stairs to the kitchen to start cooking breakfast. Preparing a meal required getting wood and coal from the basement to get the stove going, and then getting the food ready for the family as well. All in all, not a pleasant task on a hot August morning for someone with the stomach flu. And I just need to add here, I don't know if my family would ever eat if I had to do all of that. I have trouble just turning on my gas stove. I'm just saying. It'd be berries and tomatoes from the garden.
And when I've had the stomach flu, I can barely even make it from the bed to the bathroom.
Right.
And in this case, they've got this house does have a flush toilet, does have running water in the basement. But Andrew was such a tightwad when he moved into the house, he got rid of all the upstairs plumbing on the 2 main floors. So they would have to go out to the barn to get water from the pump to bring it in. So you've got this poor maid who's sick. She's wearing full dress. It's a house without electric fans, nothing. It's hot. And she's got to light a fire in the stove and prepare breakfast for this family, and probably stop to take a crap every few minutes because let's face it, she's sick. Yeah. All right. So as Bridget cooked, John Morse, who was Lizzie and Emma's uncle on their mother's side of the family, came down to the kitchen. He had just shown up the day before for a visit without much luggage, and he just came to say, hey, there's also a bunch of other Bordens who live in the town, and he was going to visit them as well. He popped into the kitchen to say good morning to the maid, and then he headed to the sitting room to wait for everyone else to get up.
Around 6:30, Abby Borden came down the back steps to the kitchen, followed by Mr. Borden, who carried his chamber pot to dump in the yard. And it should be noted that our sources differ on the chamber pot issue. It is true the upstairs did not have running water and a flushing toilet. As Jen had just mentioned, he was a little stingy. But they had a flushing toilet in the basement that the family could use. What Mr. Borden probably brought down was just the water used for washing his face and hands that day. Maybe he shaved as well.
When breakfast was ready, Abby, Andrew, and John Morse ate in the dining room while Bridget cleaned up the kitchen. Lizzie remained upstairs in bed. The final member of the household was Emma Borden, but she was staying at a friend's house and hadn't been around for a couple of days and wasn't expected back for another day or so. Smart girl. Get out while they're all sick. After breakfast at around 8:30, Andrew walked John Morse to the back door to let John out. As he left, Andrew locked the door behind him.
And we'll get into that a little bit too. These people were freaks about their frickin' locks. Lizzie came down at about 9 o'clock. She had been up through the night with that stomach bug, so had slept in late. Of note, she didn't eat much breakfast, just a couple of cookies and some coffee. I'm guessing if there was cold pizza, she would have had that as well, because, And I know you're all dying to know what the others ate that morning, so we'll tell you. They had 3-day-old mutton stew, which was delicious at a time when there was no refrigeration. They also had coffee, Johnny cakes, and very ripe bananas.
Bridget finished washing up the breakfast dishes, but her stomach was still bothering her, and she had to rush outside to be sick in the yard. When she returned, Mrs. Borden told her she needed to wash the windows inside and out. Meanwhile, Lizzie was done eating and went upstairs to her own room. And it's important to note that Bridget saw Lizzie actually climb the stairs to her room. Let's all keep that in mind for later, shall we?
We shall.
Here, Bridgie. Here, Bridgie. Actually, and here's something weird that I didn't even put in here. They'd had a previous maid named Maggie. So when they hired Bridget, Lizzie and Emma insisted that she let them call her Maggie. So they called her Maggie.
What?
Entitled little
Bitches.
bitches.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Andrew Borden left around 9:30 for the post office to see if the family had received the day's mail yet. And Abby went to work tidying the upstairs bedroom where John Morse had been staying. She came downstairs to get some fresh pillowcases and then went up again.
Bridget had already lowered the inside windows for washing and now headed down to the cellar to get her supplies for cleaning them. She then went outside to the barn to get water and stopped to chat with one of the neighborhood maids over the back fence. And this next part is important. Lizzie showed up at the back door and called out to Bridget to ask what she was doing. Bridget said she was going to wash the windows, but that Lizzie could go ahead and lock the door if she wanted because Bridget could get whatever she needed from the barn. Lizzie acknowledged this, that she heard her, but she didn't lock the door. She just went back inside.
So Bridget finished the windows and went about cleaning the inside of the house. At about 10:30, someone started rattling the front door, trying to get it open. Bridget checked to see who it was and discovered Mr. Borden had returned and couldn't get in because he had either forgotten or misplaced his key.
Curiouser and curiouser. Okay, so now the front door had 3 locks, and all of them were engaged at the time. Bridget struggled to get them open, uttering a swear word in her frustration. She would later testify her swearing prompted Lizzie to laugh at her and that the laughter had come from upstairs.
Andrew went into the dining room and then on through into the sitting room so he could read the paper and take a little snooze. Like everyone else, he was still feeling pretty rough from the stomach bug they'd all been dealing with, and he needed to chill out for a bit.
As Mr. Borden read his paper on the sofa, Lizzie came downstairs to ask her father if she had received any mail that day. She also told him that Abby had received a note from someone who was sick and left to go pay whoever it was a visit. However, she didn't say who it was, so Lizzie was unable to provide any further information, which would be a problem later on.
So we need to take just a moment to talk about the house and its layout before we go any further. 92 2nd Street, the Borden's house, was located in what was considered an unfashionable neighborhood in Fall River. It was initially built to house 2 families, so it was designed as an upper and lower flat.
These flats were laid out in a linear fashion with a parlor, dining room, and kitchen in row from front to back with 2 small bedrooms off to the side. When Borden bought the house, he made some changes. He got rid of the upstairs kitchen and made it into a master bedroom. The 2 downstairs bedrooms he joined to make a large dining room.
Therefore, what was the central dining room of the first floor became the infamous sitting room in this new setup, the sitting room where Mr. Borden was hacked to death. We also need to point out one very important feature of the second floor. The layout was such that a door existed between Lizzie's bedroom and that of her parents'. This door was equipped with a bolt on one side and a hook and an eye on the other. Lizzie also had pushed a bureau against the door on her side to help maintain her privacy.
I don't think I'd want an adjoining room to one of my children.
Yeah, so there was no hallway in these flats
Right.
or in this house. So you had to basically walk through one room to get to the next. And there were two stairways, one in the front and one in the back, which we'll kind of get into here. But it's interesting that so Lizzie's 32 years old, and Emma is 42.
Good.
10 years older than Lizzie. And they are living in this house with their dad and stepmother. And these are grown women who have no jobs, no privacy, no social lives. They could have, because Andrew Borden is wealthy, but he holds them on a very tight leash. It's just a disgusting, awful setup. I can't imagine how oppressive it must have been to exist like that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't know if are we going to get into the physicality of these girls? Were they homely?
No, in fact, there's pictures of them, and they are not homely. They're attractive young ladies. They were odd. Lizzie is and we'll get into that because there's going to be more than one episode of this. But Lizzie is very blunt and very direct. So much so that she wasn't a demure,
Submissive.
self-effacing person. Yeah, she wasn't. And so when the police question her, and again, we'll get into this later, she's like, I already told you that, or I guess it took as long as it took. And they decided they didn't like her.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not she was guilty, the opinion of the police was very biased against her.
Right.
But she was not homely. There are pictures. You can easily find a picture of
Sure.
Lizzie Borden online, and she was attractive. She was petite. She was not a tall person. I don't know if she was probably average build.
Right.
I don't think she was super thin or heavy. Abby, the stepmother, was probably 200 pounds. She was a very portly woman. And Emma would probably be like Lizzie.
Okay. So the importance of the layout is that it divided the upstairs into a front and back portion. No one could get to the back stairs from Lizzie's room, and no one could get to the front stairs from Andrew and Abby's room. Also, you may have noticed that the Borden family likes to lock things up. This was for a couple of reasons. They tended to lock the house because Andrew Borden was a bit of an asshole and tended to make lots of people angry.
He was a ruthless businessman, and he didn't tolerate fools. He was also just not a very nice guy. As a result, folks tended to threaten him from time to time. Therefore, security was a must for him.
And another reason for the locking and security was that the family had been robbed the year before. Andrew reported to the police that his desk had been broken into. The thief made off with $100, a watch, and a watch chain, and the culprit was never caught.
The Bordens could not understand how anyone could have gotten into the house with so many locks in place. Lizzie mentioned that she had seen the cellar door open, but even then, no one could possibly have entered the house through the cellar and then come into the house undetected, not when so many people were at home all of the time. Andrew finally told the authorities he doubted anyone would ever find the real thief.
And this is interesting because Andrew seemed to believe that the robbery was done by someone in the house. And it is speculated that he suspected Lizzie. After this incident, he continued to keep his bedroom door locked, but he kept the key on the mantle in the sitting room in plain sight. One could argue that this was done as a sort of a dare to Lizzie.
Now, knowing all of that, let's get back to our timeline. Andrew is in the parlor. Lizzie enters and asks him about the mail, and then says that Abby has gone to visit a sick friend after being summoned by a note, which no one saw. After this, Andrew gets up, takes the key from the mantel, and goes up to his room for a few minutes. Lizzie also went upstairs to her room. Andrew then returns and sits on the sofa again to get busy with what would turn out to be his last nap.
When Lizzie comes back, she is all dressed up to go downtown. She asked Bridget if she planned to go out that day. It was a good day for shopping, you see. There was a sale on dress goods at Sargent's, a store downtown, and Lizzie thought she would head out and pick up some fabric for a dress. The sign in the window speaks to me. Sale, it says.
Sale!
Sale. Bridget decided to stay at home, and Lizzie advised her to lock the door since Mrs. Borden was gone and Lizzie was probably leaving as well.
Okay, so Lizzie pulled down her ironing board and set it up on the dining room table. She got out about a dozen handkerchiefs to iron, and she set her irons on the stove to heat up. By now, it was 10:50 in the morning, and the house was really, really hot. Bridget was feeling absolutely awful, and she headed upstairs to just go back to bed. So she's been out, she's cooked breakfast, she's washed the windows, she's cleaned the inside of the house. She is feeling, she's puked once in the yard. So Bridget's feeling like crap. So she goes upstairs to bed. And I want to retrace just 1 second. Abby had come down. So John and Andrew left. Abby came down. She started to make the bed upstairs, came down to get some pillowcases, went upstairs to the guest room. So she took the front stairs up. Lizzie went upstairs back to her room, also taking the front stairs. Okay. Bridget goes outside, goes down to the cellar, then goes outside to work on the outside windows. Lizzie comes down and comes to the back door and asks her what she's doing.
So when she comes down and goes to the back door, she has to come down the front steps, and does she walk outside or go through the house to the back door?
She goes through the house to the back door, and there's back stairs in the kitchen. So the back door's off the kitchen. So Abby goes up the front stairs. Lizzie goes up the front stairs. Now, when Mr. Borden came home, Abby is supposedly gone. We know she's not. She's dead upstairs. He goes up to his room, but he has to take the back stairs, which is why he wouldn't see her body. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because she's in the front house in the guest room. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
So now the stage is set. Mrs. Borden is allegedly out of the house. Lizzie has changed her clothes and is ready to go downtown. Bridget is resting. John Morse has gone off to visit relatives, and Mr. Borden is resting in the sitting room. It's almost time for murder.
But wait! First, let's talk just a bit about the family members. I know everyone is impatient to hear the nitty-gritty about the deaths of Andrew and Abby Borden. We sure are, Jen. But hearing about the family is critical to the outcome of the case and can even shed some light on motive. So be a little patient.
So let's start with Lizzie. She was born in 1860 to Andrew Borden and his first wife, Sarah, who died when Lizzie was a baby. When Lizzie was 4, Andrew married Abby Durfee, who was already pushing 40 at the time and had been labeled that harshest of words, spinster. Lizzie completed high school at age 18, but what with being a woman and all, college really wasn't an option for her. So she stayed home and lived at the mercy of her father and stepmother.
There really wasn't much for a girl to do at that time except wait for a marriage proposal. Sadly, no one really wanted to come calling on Lizzie. The few men who did were intimidated and scared off by crabby old Andrew, the richest man in town as well as the rudest. The result, slowly but surely, Lizzie settled in to spinsterhood.
That's so sad.
Mhm.
Because there are men who like to marry bitchy women.
Oh yeah.
There really are.
I mean, if there had been internet, she could have, she could have gone on bitchesonly.com,
Or
Sure.
spinstersonly.com.
spinstersonly.com, or
Well, and there could have
dominatrix.com. And
well, and too, you remember, and we've talked about this several times about that couple that we knew at the Wayne. What are you two doing? I can see my mother and my sister, and it looked like my sister just kind of grabbed my mom's boob, but I think she was shooing the dog out
I
of the
swear
way.
she didn't.
I'm just saying, we're close,
But not that close.
So I knew that's not what happened. It just looked like that's what happened. Anyway, it was kind of funny.
it's a Pearl thing. So
But we talked a little bit about that couple at the nursing home that we took care of. The guy, the man was very, very handsome, and the woman, sweet as pie, was a bit homely. And you can see that in their marriage pictures. They didn't get married until their mid 40s, but they lived out in BFE in Nebraska, where the population of the town was probably 7. And so there really was no one for them to marry. And the woman had said that it started out as a business deal because she was single and he needed a wife to take care of the house and the necessities that a woman would take care of on a farm because he was by himself. And so theirs started out that way, and then they fell in love and all that. So I'm just saying, if Andrew had given them a chance, even though they might have been rude and bossy or whatever, there very well could have been like a business deal they could have set up too. Boy, he was an asshole.
yeah. Oh, he was. The girls weren't any great, especially Lizzie was not a nice person, and Abby was not a nice person either. And there were certainly some bad feelings between the stepmother and the girls, um, which, we'll get into here shortly. But there certainly was motive. If you're going to hold somebody prisoner financially and emotionally for their entire life, that's no kind of existence at all.
No.
And I think Emma was more resigned to it. She was older. She was in her 40s. She was more demure. Lizzie was kind of more outspoken, very, what I want to say, short with her answers, very opinionated. But even Lizzie, she was active in the community.
Right.
It wasn't like she was a complete hermit or a complete recluse.
Right.
I think they just kind of, were stuck in this existence that sucked. I cannot imagine being, how when we were growing up and we were always scared to bring somebody home because dad would get grouchy.
I'm not going to comment.
Is grouchy the word? Sure, we'll go with grouchy. Yeah, to have anybody step even inside our house.
It was always a gamble, right?
Yeah.
And so I can only imagine nobody wanted to deal with Andrew. He was miserly. He was literally an Ebenezer Scrooge of that time period,
Yeah.
Anyway.
And on a side note too, about the girls and their kind of bitchiness and or their personalities in general, it doesn't, who knows, he really kind of robbed them, because if they fell in love with somebody, or if somebody found and loved them, they could have been a very happy person.
Well, everybody's lives could have turned out differently.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is that makes somebody, if you think of happiness versus misery, happiness is a much more pleasant emotion to have, right?
Right.
So pleasure versus pain, pleasure generally is a more desirable experience.
Unless you're a sadist or masochist. Yes.
Exactly. I mean, there are those people, but I can't for the life of me understand why people would want to hang on to resentment and anger and rage when it does nothing except for make you feel bad.
Right.
And Andrew seemed to hold that feeling and to lord it over the entire town. All right. Continuing. Mm-hmm.
And what else was there for a spinster to do except volunteer work? So Lizzie taught Sunday school at the Central Congregational Church on the Hill and served on the board of the Fall River Hospital. She was also head of the Fruit and Flower Mission, which was a group of young ladies who took time to visit the sick and the poor with baskets of goods throughout Fall River. I would say, give me some money, sister. I don't want your basket of cookies, but whatevs.
I'd take the cookies.
Well, I take the cookies, but if I'm poor, my digestive system isn't going to handle those cookies very well. Just saying.
That's probably true.
You know.
Now, Lizzie's older sister Emma doesn't play much into this story except in the periphery, but it is important to point out that Emma was 10 years older, that Emma was 10 years old when Lizzie was born. And as Mrs. Sarah Borden was dying, Emma promised that she would look after her younger sister.
Oof.
She too, I know, she too was a spinster and lived in the Borden household. But why do you keep scrolling?
Because it keeps going.
Our mother is
Stop.
swearing.
Don't touch that button.
She's swearing, people.
No touchy on this side. Center.
Sit on the right hand.
Center. There you go. Avoid that little guy because he will scroll. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you please leave in one of her shits because that's really funny. Shit.
Oh yeah.
Shit.
I'm gonna start my section over. You need to just quit touching things. Can you just quit touching things? All right. You're just gonna stop. You can quit. All I see out of the corner of my eye. She says she's not, but she is.
Listen.
She's just touching things.
She's over there drinking a Lucky. She's reaching. Slap her hand. Slap her hand.
Pardon my twitchy mother over here.
Yes.
All right. Now,
I'm sorry.
Lizzie's
I have to say this, though. It is really funny when she goes, shit.
You can tell because, see, even now, her finger's hovering.
Yes.
She's about to touch.
Yes. Okay.
I'm
just, yes. Yes. Okay, no fingers.
Don't put that in there.
As Mrs. Sarah Borden was dying, Emma promised that she would look after her younger sister. She too was a spinster and lived in the Borden household. But as we've mentioned, she was not even in town at the time of the murders.
Abby was a member of the Durfee family, which was another prominent family in Fall River. Although the Durfees couldn't claim the wealth that Mr. Borden could, they were still considered part of the elite. It was speculated that Andrew chose Abby as a wife for her connection to such a prominent family as well as her age. A woman of 40 was sure to be a practical person, a good housekeeper, and capable of rearing 2 young children.
Andrew Borden got his start in business by being a mortician. Eventually, he moved up in the world, and at the time of his death, he was a really big deal in Fall River. He could have lived in any mansion he wanted, but he kept his family in a modest house among the commoners. In 1892, he was president of one of the largest banks in town, and at age 72, showed no signs of slowing down. Kind of like Warren Buffett.
Exactly. In addition to being president at one bank, he also sat on the board of directors at 3 other local banks. He was the landlord of several commercial properties and was the director of 3 cloth mills in Fall River. He was a total jerk to those he did business with. He was so cheap that he'd collect things, broken or old things, fix them up, and then resell them for a profit.
In fact, on the day of the murder, he had found an old broken lock on the sidewalk and picked it up, hoping to repair it and sell it to someone. His miserly ways, rude manner, and uncompromising nature caused him more than a little trouble. The family had had threats made from time to time, and as a result, the house was kept locked up tight.
Okay, so he seems to be like the first person to do the glow ups. Instead of donating stuff, you fix it up and then you resell it.
And that's called what?
A glow up, I think. I'm pretty sure. You bedazzle it or whatever.
Oh.
And you make it real pretty, and then people want it. Not that he was making things pretty, but he was making them usable again.
Upcycle.
Or a glow up.
Or now we're just making shit up. We're just going to make shit up, and it was our idea.
You know what? That's what we're going to do. Okay, so now there were a few conflicts in the family. For starters, Emma and Lizzie had a really rich dad who kept them on a tight leash and didn't allow them to spend any money. This was always a bone of contention among them. It caused so much distress that a year prior to the murders in 1891, Andrew sent Lizzie to Europe with a group of relatives so that she might have a bit of fun.
This seems generous to me, but it's speculated that it only made Lizzie want more. And then there was that issue with Abby's sister. Sadly, her rent was being raised, and she was going to have to leave her home. So Andrew came up with a solution. He bought the house and served as her landlord.
His daughters were a little ticked about this. He bought Abby's sister a house and wouldn't allow Emma and Lizzie a place of their own. That was really unacceptable to the girls. So to make up for this, Mr. Borden gave the girls a property he already owned and said they could have the rent from that as their own. But the damage had already been done.
That's right. The girls stopped calling Abby Mother and referred to her as Mrs. Borden. Ooh, that's cold. And Lizzie stopped taking meals with the elderly couple. They were all estranged, so to speak, even though they lived in the same house. So let's take a minute to talk about the Borden household so far. What do we think of this family, Mrs. Keck? What do you think of this family? That's you, Mrs. Keck.
Oh, I'm Mrs. Keck. Thank you. I think they're...
Where am I?
I'm sorry. I should be paying more attention, shouldn't I?
Yes, your daughter is speaking.
Well, unfortunately, the family is highly dysfunctional. Lack of communication, lack of caring for one another, just totally, really an unacceptable situation for the two daughters who had to live in this ungodly household.
Agreed, Mom. Agreed on that.
I agree too. I think it's a shitty situation, right?
Yeah, it really is.
But every family has issues, right? There's conflict. There are bad dinners. There are hurt feelings.
Well, yeah, but
this isn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. You already started. I thought you were talking. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
I thought we were debating this. Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, you said every family has issues. And yes, that's true. But geez Louise.
I know.
Yeah, they had a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Every family has issues, right? There's conflict. There are bad dinners. There are hurt feelings. This is inevitable when you love someone. Most of the time, these issues just resolve themselves. Rarely does familial conflict result in murder. And we are just about to the nitty-gritty of this episode, the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. But first, we need to let you know about a couple of things that would help shine the light of suspicion on Lizzie when all was said and done.
So, a day or so before the murder, Abby visited their neighbor across the street, Dr. Bowen. She said the family was sick and she feared someone was poisoning them. No one could seem to shake the stomach issues which had occurred. Bowen naturally quizzed her about their food supply, and Abby said they'd been eating 3-day-old mutton soup. Keep in mind, there is no refrigeration at the time, and this was August.
So are you saying
something?
I just touched this. I just touched it.
Just a little bit.
I'm using my finger again. Okay.
There.
I'm done. Okay. She's going to hit me over the head.
No, she's
I'm going
not.
to get 40 whacks here in a minute.
Oh, it's adding up. It started.
She's up to 25, I'm sure.
I am up to 25 whacks. I haven't decided what I'm going to use yet, but The whack count is
The
climbing.
whack count is climbing. Okay, so with our mother's life in jeopardy right now, I'm going to say, so are you saying that possibly this was food poisoning that they had and not poison? Because it's 3-day-old mutton soup and it's hot out. Is that what you're saying?
That's kind of what the doctor was thinking.
Okay.
And it points to as well, Andrew was such a freaking tightwad that he kept making him reheat this soup on the back of the stove.
Right.
They had it for freaking breakfast. They'd had it for meals. They had it for, and so this is something he wouldn't even get fresh food for them. So they're eating this shit and it's 100 degrees in August. Okay. No wonder they're puking and crapping their brains out.
Right, right. And
Just thinking about it makes me want to throw up.
yeah, yeah. And what a trooper Bridget is. Good Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Lizzie also paid a visit to someone. She visited her BFF, Alice Russell, and confided some interesting things to her. She said she believed someone was, quote, going to do something, end quote, to the family, but she did not clarify what. She only said she felt afraid. Lizzie, Alice later stated, was so afraid of something happening that she wrote to her friends her sister was staying with and said she planned to join them all as soon as she could get away.
That's right. But it was Wednesday when she sent this, and she had a church meeting on Sunday, so she wouldn't be able to join them until Monday at the earliest. She also told Alice about the suspicion that the family was being poisoned, just as Abby had done with Dr. Bowen. Lizzie said there had been a stranger on the property. Her father had made an enemy, and whoever it was bound to do terrible things to the family.
As she left Alice that day, she said she was going to sleep with one eye open. Okay, she said this, I'm afraid somebody will do something. I don't know what, but someone will do something. The question we pose to you is this. Did Lizzie say this to Alice because she was already planning the murders and was voicing a fear of malice to her BFF, and perhaps this would help remove suspicion from herself?
And so now at last, we arrive at the murders. Remember, Mrs. Borden is allegedly out visiting a sick friend. Bridget is upstairs having just laid down for a rest. Andrew Borden is in the sitting room having a bit of a rest. Everybody's resting. And Lizzie had apparently stepped outside to wait for her irons to heat up on the stove. What, did she go out for a smoke? Or was it just hot?
I just did the same thing Mom's been doing.
Ha 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 ha.
It's contagious. She went outside because it was so hot in the kitchen.
Okay, she went outside because it was so hot in the kitchen. Okay. When she came back in, she discovered her father's body on the sofa. That's when all hell broke loose.
Lizzie, upon seeing the body, screamed. Bridget called down from upstairs, asking what was the matter. Come down quick, Lizzie called. Bridget ran down and found Lizzie completely backed up against the back screen door. Go for Dr. Bowen as soon as you can. I think Father is hurt.
Bridget ran across the street to Dr. Bowen's house, but he was out making house calls. Bridget returned to the house where Bridget asked, Miss Lizzie, where are you? Didn't I leave the screen door locked? Didn't I leave the screen door hooked?
Mom, it's okay. There's no. She did the finger thing again. There you go. I got it. Lie down before you hurt yourself. It's time for, Mom needs a bit of a rest.
Mrs. Keck
Mom,
needs a
how
little
about
bit
you
of
go-
rest.
Go into the parlor and have a bit of a rest.
I'm never going to be asked back.
Oh, yes, you are.
Of course you are.
Okay, so Lizzie's story, which would change a bit over the next several days, was that she was out in the backyard. She heard a groan and came in. I just keep.
She heard a groan. Woo!
Mom's just tickling me with her shit. I just love it. Okay, I'm going to start over.
Okay.
Lizzie's story, which would change a bit over the next several days, was that she was out in the backyard. She heard a groan and came in, as one does when you're outside and you can hear a groan from inside. Very interesting. Finding the screen door wide open, she now told Bridget to go and get her friend Alice Russell. Someone still needed to get a doctor, and Lizzie did not want to be alone in the house. So Bridget took off to fetch Alice, and Lizzie remained at the house.
After only a minute or so, Lizzie heard from behind her, "Lizzie, what is the matter?" Mrs. Adelaide Churchill was a young widow who lived next door and had leaned her head out the window to see what all the commotion was about. And she was like, "Abner, Abner, you won't believe what's happening next door." So Lizzie said, "Oh, Mrs. Churchill, do come over. Somebody has killed father."
Now, Mrs. Churchill asked Lizzie where her father was, and Lizzie said he was in the sitting room. Then she asked Lizzie where she had been, and Lizzie said she had been in the barn looking for a piece of iron. I want to say that over. I want to start.
You want to touch it?
Yeah.
You want to touch it? I'll
No,
touch it.
I'm not going to touch it. Now, Mrs. Churchill asked Lizzie where her father was, and Lizzie said, well, he's in the sitting room. Mrs. Churchill next asked where Abby Borden was, to which Lizzie replied, I don't know. She had a note to go and see someone that was sick this morning, but I don't know but what they have maybe killed her too. Father must have had an enemy, for we have all been sick and we think the milk has been poisoned. Dr. Bowen is not at home, but I must have a doctor.
So Mrs. Churchill left as... Excuse me.
Amateurs. I'm surrounded by amateurs.
This from the woman who couldn't quit laughing for the first 15 minutes we tried to do our fucking script last week. So, Mom, don't let her intimidate you.
I'm intimidating. Mom's intimidating.
So, Mrs. Churchill left as well in search of a doctor, and Bridget finally made it to Alice's house. Alice was immediately concerned that things at the Borden house had worsened. After all, she knew about the potential poisoning and worried that maybe everyone there had gotten sicker overnight. Bridget said, I don't know, but what Mr. Borden is dead.
I don't know why they say that also weird. But what?
But what?
Yeah, that they say that in constantly.
Yeah.
Idiot.
I have a question. Why wasn't Mr. Borden at work? Why was he at home? This was during the week.
He was sick.
He was sick at home.
Yeah, so he walked to the bank and then he came back because he didn't feel well. He had gotten the mail, whatever. And so Lizzie came down and was like, oh, you're home. Did you get the mail? And
okay.
Could you please lay here on this sofa so I can stab you?
So
That's right.
could you
Okay.
position your head? Father, I think it would be more comfortable if your head was right
Here.
here.
And don't
Right
mind
here.
the knife that I'm wielding in my hand.
And I'm just going to, say somebody wanted to lean around this doorway and look, I'm just going to pull the couch over this way
Exactly.
a little. And then let me just touch your temple a little bit. And I'm just going to make this chopping motion. I'm just
And you
trying
just
to
lay
see
there.
something.
You just lay there and relax.
Just with my hand, and then you go to sleep, and then we'll just check in later. Dad.
Is it a hatchet or is it an axe?
Oh, it's a hatchet, and we discussed the difference on a past episode, Mom. A hatchet is just a one-handed little small axe, and an axe is much bigger.
But hatchet was really hard to work into a jump rope chant, so over time it changed to axe. Damn it! Shit.
That's gonna be our go-to word now. We got to get T-shirts made. Mrs. Keck says, "Shit." Mom, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love having you here. It's fun. Okay.
All right. So Bridget took off to the Bordens again, leaving Alice to get her hat and shawl and follow as soon as she could, because it was August and you need your hat and your
94 degrees. Yes.
And you don't want to show the tips of your ears because you might arouse somebody, and then it would be your own damn
And everybody
fault.
would be mesmerized. It would be a whole thing.
It would be a thing. So,
Well, in that day and age, you never went anywhere without your hat and your shawl.
exactly. So by the time she got back to the Borden house, Dr. Bowen had arrived and he was just climbing out of his carriage and entering. He was a little shocked when he saw Lizzie. She looked like she'd seen something awful. So when he asked her what was up, she said she thought maybe her father had been stabbed or something.
One can only imagine what Dr. Bowen felt when he stumbled into the sitting room to find Mr. Borden's body on the sofa. The man's head had been bashed in, and there was nothing more than a pulp of gored flesh, a pulped melon. The destruction was so complete that Dr. Bowen
Here you go. Lie down before you hurt yourself.
was unable. The destruction was so complete that Dr. Bowen was unable to determine at first if the body actually belonged to Mr. Borden. His eyes swept the room to make sure that nothing was out of place, that there was no sign of struggle. Everything was exactly in its place. At last, Dr. Bowen lifted the limp hand and discovered there was no pulse.
Shit, where am I? Okay. Are we at the discovered the limp hand and discovered there's no pulse? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't long before Alice Russell showed up to the Borden house. Did she say that? Or did you?
Did I say something?
She said,
I'm sorry. You'll have to edit that out. I apologize.
You don't need to apologize.
Shut your mouth. Okay. All right. I'm going to try to not swear so much.
No, go ahead. It's right at home. It wasn't long before Alice Russell showed up to the Borden house and took charge of looking after a very dazed Lizzie. Mrs. Churchill worked to fan the youngest Borden girl, and Alice worked to rub her hands. After a while, Lizzie looked up and said, "Will somebody find Mrs. Borden?"
Lizzie explained that Mrs. Borden had had a note and had left to visit someone who was ill. Bridget said, "Oh, Lizzie, if I knew where Mrs. Borden's sister was, I can go and see if Mrs. Borden was there and tell her that Mr. Borden was very sick."
Lizzie's response to this was, "No, I think I heard her come in. This was interesting." This was interesting. Excuse me.
Quick, get her a drink.
Interesting. If Mrs. Borden was home, wouldn't she have come running when Lizzie screamed? Wouldn't she hear all the commotion now occurring inside of the house? Still, Lizzie was insistent that someone go and look to see if she was home.
And this is curious because didn't Lizzie say, "Will someone find Mrs. Borden?" Like, I've already killed her and nobody's found her body yet. No, I'm kidding. I don't know, but I'm just saying she brings it up and then she says, "No, I think I heard her come in." I don't know. It just sounds a little sus to me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but there was too much commotion in the house, so no one really went looking for Abby at the moment. Dr. Bowen came to the kitchen to basically give Lizzie the definitive news that, yep, her dad was sure dead all right. And then he slapped her in the face to wake her up a little bit, said, "Get up." No, that her dad was dead all right. Lizzie said, "Doctor, will you send a telegram to my sister Emma for me?" Dr. Bowen said, "I will do anything for you."
Dr. Bowen left out the back door and encountered a plainclothed police officer who came in and assessed the scene. Lizzie once again mentioned that someone should go and look for Mrs. Borden. So Alice and Mrs. Churchill tightened their corsets and decided they were the pair for the job.
The pair climbed the stairs as carefully as they could, concerned that the murderer could still be in the house. The upstairs was arranged in such a way that as they got to the top of the stairs, they could look through the banisters and see straight under the bed in the guest room to the bureau and beyond.
And then...
To the bureau and beyond!
Do you want me to say that again?
No, you're fine.
It's to the bureau beyond.
Yes. Okay. All right, cut.
I read it even after
All right.
I read it. No, it says that to the bureau and beyond.
I was leaving when I said that. Infinity and beyond. Okay. The upstairs was arranged. The upstairs was arranged in such a way that as they got to the stop of the stairs, they could look through the banisters and see straight under the bed in the guest room to the bureau beyond.
Sorry, I'm trying.
She'll get it together eventually. It's like this all the time.
Oh,
very
thank God I wear
unprofessional.
Depends. Okay. There, they spied the prone body of Abby Borden lying in a pool of blood. And we are going to leave it here this week. But let's talk for a few minutes about who we think did this. Did Abby really go out? Did Lizzie commit the crime? Did Lizzie set it all up to seem as if someone was poisoning the family so she would be in the clear if she really decided to whack her parents? What do we think?
I think she did it.
I think she totally did it. What do you think, Mrs. Keck?
Mom.
Oh, well, I think she did it too. She was an angry young lady. Well, kind of. She was a spinster.
I think,
And as we know,
spinsters can get angry.
she needs to drink. That spinster needs to drink some damn Truly. She needs to drink some
and
water.
quite honestly, they needed a brothel for men because I think bitch needed to get laid. I'm just saying.
I think so.
Sorry, Mama, but she did.
There are other things we'll go into because there were some other suspicions cast on other individuals.
Right, and
so we'll get into this later a little deeper.
I'm excited to look at, all because I've heard that the police they were all over the scene. The scene wasn't secured. She went down at some point and changed clothes in the bathroom or in the basement, and nothing was found or anything like that. So I'm interested to see all that or hear all that. Talk about all that.
Yeah. We'll go into that next time, and hopefully Mrs. Keck will be joining us on.
I would hope. I hope so too.
Well,
yes.
Well, thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, want to thank our special.
Before we say that, I think that we need to have a printed out copy of the script for Mrs. Keck.
You can be sure that I will have a printed copy next time, so I'm not subject to this technology that I seem to be having difficulty manipulating this morning.
Yeah.
It's been a trial for me. I'm not going to lie.
She has been sitting here gritting her teeth. I can hear her teeth grinding.
Wonderful experience for me.
So we want to thank our very special guest, Mom, today.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes.
And she will be back for the follow-up episodes of Lizzie Borden.
Absolutely.
And probably something in the future as we go along as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to thank everybody for listening. Please, we love hearing from you. Reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram.
Email us at ichabodshousePod@gmail.com.
Until next time, remember, Ichabod loves you.
Carry a flashlight and always bring extra pants.